Hello and welcome to Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. I'm your host, Zulfi, joined by Kyle Ramnarai, and we're back to recap another week of Raptors action, update the roster rankings, and then look at the next week ahead. But before we do, we wanted to say thank you to everyone for their positive feedback on our first episode. Every like, every comment, every share, every bit of attention that it was given, even if it was just for a second. We are very appreciative. And keep telling us what you think, whether you love it, whether you hate it. We want to know. So again, thank you for taking the time. Keep supporting. We're going to keep growing as this goes. And I know I speak for me and for Kyle. We're having so much fun doing this, and we're going to keep doing it. But without further ado, let's run it back. All right, we're going to start things off how we always like to start off with a schedule recap. In the last 7 days, the Toronto Raptors played 5 games. It's a jam-packed week of basketball. 5 games going all the way back to Sunday, and that equals a jam-packed graphic. I know it's a lot of information on there, but don't worry, I'm going to break it all down for you. And we don't need to spend a ton of time on these first 2 games. We talk about polar opposites. First game of the week, the Raptors dismantled the Detroit Pistons, a 29-point win where everything went right for Toronto, handing Detroit their, let me check my notes, 12th consecutive loss. Yeah, this team is not very good. They're at 14 now, by the way. They haven't won after that game. The Raptors set a franchise record for assists at 44 and tied the most points they've scored at Scotiabank Arena at 142. Pascal Siakam led the way with 23 points. That's his 7th game in a row against the Pistons, scoring 20 or more. He really likes playing against that team, and it was an easy Raptors win. Moving on to the Orlando Magic, complete opposite of that game. The Raptors got dominated, basically from tip-off, facing one of the league's best defensive teams. Turnovers kept costing Toronto any momentum they tried to create. They ended with 23 giveaways to Orlando's 12. You're not going to win many ball games like that. It felt like a blowout basically the entire way. Banchero had 25 to lead the way, and Suggs was electric the entire time with 18 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 steals. And he seemed to just enjoy giving it to the Raptors. What a spark plug for this Orlando team, who are actually around the top of the East now. They're a surprise team to everyone, and good on them. And then we got to the Pacers game. On the second night of a back-to-back after taking on Orlando, the question was, could Toronto keep up with Indiana's league best offense? It's safe to say they did. Despite being down double digits yet again, they clawed back to make it a 1-point contest after 3 quarters. Huge efforts from Scotty, Pascal, and Dennis, each putting up over 20, and Malachi Flynn had his best game of the year, 14 points on 6 of 8 shooting. What a great effort. Now after that, the final quarter went back and forth, multiple lead changes in the final minute and 30, all of which led to Scotty taking us on a trip down memory lane. Barnes and Siakam worked a fake dribble handoff for Scotty to get that slam, which ended up being the game-winning basket. Raptors fans might remember that as a vintage JV play that they ran a bunch back in the day. Notably, Valanciunas used the fake DHO drive to cap off a win against Milwaukee in 2018, and I don't care what anyone says, he deserved an and 1 on that dunk. That was a hell of an effort. Siakam finished with 36 and 10, and Barnes had 20 and 12 himself. It's the first time Scotty and Pascal have both had 20-point double-doubles on the same night. The two of them are starting to build some chemistry together. From there, Toronto went into a game against Chicago. Now, coming into this in-season tournament matchup, both teams were officially eliminated from the tournament. Bummer. But it was also their first contest since Chicago's bonkers overtime win over Toronto early in the year. And Toronto made sure things weren't so close this time around. Everything went the Raptors' way. All 5 starters finished in double figures, led by OG Anunoby. His best game since returning from injury, tying a season high with 26 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. The Raptors are now 4-0 this season when Anunoby scores 20 or more points. Now, the only other notable moment in this game, since it was pretty much a blowout, was when former Raptors legend DeMar DeRozan got ejected after not being happy with Siakam taking a late 3 despite being up big. And on his way out, DeRozan walked past Masai Ujiri, and the two embraced. It's good to see that they've made up after all these years. Guess the saying goes, time does heal all wounds. It's pretty true. And then we get to the final game of the week when the Raptors took on the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was a tale of 2 halves for the Raps in this one. The first 2 quarters looked good as Toronto seemed to have it all figured out. The offense was clicking, 45% from the field, 52 points, and a 10-point lead. Trent Jr. had 11 points at the break. OG was clamping Donovan Mitchell. Things were looking good. And then Max Strus happened. Yeah, Strus had 20 points in the third quarter. That was as many as the entire Raptors team had in the frame, as they got outscored by 12 points in the third. Max Strus, welcome. You're the newest member of the Raptors Killer Club, joining names like Jeremy Lamb and Doug McDermott. Toronto did make it interesting in the fourth as the game got within a possession multiple times, but the Raptors were doing themselves no favors. Toronto missed 9 free throws. They shot 23 more times from the line than Cleveland did and still lost. Definitely feels like a missed opportunity for a dub. But despite the charity stripe struggles, Toronto got the game within a single point thanks to a slick ATO play by Darko that got Schroeder an open look for 3 that he cashed. Fortunately, the Raptors didn't get any closer than that. The final possession, they stalled out, ultimately losing 105 to 102. Jakob really kept the Raps in this game, one of his best performances of the season. He had 18 points, 13 rebounds, 8 of 9 shooting, while OG again did his thing defensively, and Donovan Mitchell limiting him to 10 points on 4 of 17 shooting. But alas, the Raptors weren't meant to win this game, and with that, it caps all your Raptors action from the past week. I know a lot happened, but through it all, the Toronto Raptors came out with a 3-2 record, sitting at 8-9 overall in the season. Now, Kyle, there was tons of information there, 5 games, jam-packed. I got to ask, what do you think about this? And is there anything you need to ask coming out of that?
What I wanted to ask too is, like, we saw a couple weeks ago in San Antonio, we saw how Scotty took over in the clutch, right? And we heard on the Raptor show when they asked Dennis Schroeder, like, what happened there, and he said Darko was going to run up a play, but he said, no, I want to do this, let me step back 3 it. And then tonight in Cleveland, we saw them not execute the best. We saw Gary trying to get that turnover. He was like doing, like, I don't know what he was trying to do in the post, but apparently the play blew up. You know, it was kind of all over the place. So what do you think the Raptors need to do in the clutch? Do they not have someone that they can go to? Do they still need to figure it out? What do you think the Raptors got to do here?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. And to the last point that you said, I think they still need to figure it out because they just haven't had many opportunities to play in crunch time games. Most of their games have been a blowout one way or the other. Either they're blowing teams out or they're getting blown out, quite honestly. They've had maybe 3 or 4 games that have gone down to the wire, and that's just not enough for a team that's figuring it out with players having new roles, a coach that's doing this for the first time. They've played less than 20 games and they've just started to figure out the regular things where it's like Pascal's role offensively. How are they playing with their main pieces together? OG's been out, so they haven't had some continuity there. Some role guys have been injured and out. So they're starting to figure things out slowly, and just crunch time hasn't been able to be a priority in that because they haven't been playing many crunch time minutes. So I think it's one of those things where, like, last time Scotty Barnes was just able to say, give me the ball and I'll figure it out. But the reality is we don't know if that's going to work every time. Our sample size is very small. We haven't seen Scotty take over in the clutch in the past. And this season we've seen it in one game really against San Antonio. Other than some other opportunities and plays here or there, we don't know if he's that killer yet who can take over for like a long in the grand scheme of things rather. So I think they just need to really figure it out. I will say I'm with you where I don't think that play made a lot of sense at the end, in the sense that Cleveland must have blown it up. So they need to be able to figure out like how this team is going to like rank their responsibilities and priorities of players. So if that play gets blown up, who's going to be that go-to guy where they're just going to say like, all right, we just need to get this person the ball and let them figure it out because what we were trying to do just didn't work. And that's going to come with time because right now they've just started to figure out how Pascal and Scotty can work together. So now they're going to have to figure out, well, who's going to get the final shot? Is it going to be one of those things where it's like whoever has the best look type of situations, or it's going to be, well, this is our best player, let's give him the ball and let him figure it out. So I think that's going to come with time. They have to figure it out, but for now it's going to be a growing process.
And this is kind of a side note type question. I know you mentioned it against the game in Chicago where they lost, and we've seen DeRozan himself get frustrated, ripping towels. You know, he got ejected in that game. But even though after all this has happened, like, do you think there's a place for DeRozan on the Raptors if he were to enter the trade market?
That's a fun question. I don't know, to be honest. Like, DeRozan fitting on the Raptors, I'll say no, because just the spacing of it all. The Raptors' biggest issue is spacing. They need more shooters, and ironically, DeRozan is a really good shooter, but he just doesn't shoot from outside the arc very often. So they wouldn't really need to space out much for him anyways. He's a very similar player than some of the guys they have on the team in terms of like he can slash really well. He's gotten a lot better as a distributor and creator. But honestly, I see like the spacing of his game very similar to Pascal Siakam, a guy who plays in the mid-range often, goes through the post, can pass and kick out as he needs to. So I think the nostalgia of it would be great. I would love DeRozan back on this team. I think he's a top 5 Raptor of all time. He's awesome, and I think his legacy here is cemented. But in terms of just how he fits with this roster, depending on what comes back, what goes out, I don't really know if it would work spacing-wise and just fitting with the current roster. But obviously, to get DeRozan, you'd have to maybe move like a Pascal, a Gary, or some of these other guys. So it'd be fun to consider, but I just don't think it would work out like with this current construction. All right, cool. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for our summary of this week's schedule. Now we're going to move on to our statistical leaders coming out of the week. All right, now after another week of hoops, here are your Raptor stat leaders. When it comes to scoring the ball, there's been a bit of a shift who the team's primary bucket getter is now. Pascal Siakam has jumped over the 20 point per game threshold for the first time this season. Meanwhile, Scotty Barnes has taken a step back to under 20 points after a couple of weeks from his hot start. But it comes as no surprise considering how much Siakam has gotten involved in the offensive game plan. Feeding him in the post so much, letting him create, it seems like he's much more of a priority. And he's hitting a bit of a groove after a slow start. He's really gotten a handle of how he's going to be able to excel in this offense. Now the next part is going to be how can him and Scotty both do it at the same time. You're seeing a bit of that, but for now, this seems to be a Spicy P's team in terms of offensive production, and we'll see Scotty get his role back into it. But meanwhile, OG falls out of the top three for scoring. He's had a couple quiet outings. He did have that good game recently where he had 26 against the Bulls, but he's still coming back from injury, so we don't really need to make too much of that. But it did make way for Schroeder, who had a jump. He's now nearly at 17 points a night. In terms of assists and rebounds, your leaders remain the same. Schroeder leading the squad in dimes with 6.6 a night, and Barnes taking care of the glass, still averaging 9.1 a game. The only other trend really is, again, Siakam's involvement on ball. His assist numbers have gone up, and his rebounds have fallen down, primarily because he's more involved on ball. He's making more decisions, playmaking, and creating, so he's not having to take care of the little things like being around the glass. So it makes sense. But Kyle, I want to know from you, are there any things you see from this, any trends that you're kind of peeking out from these stats changes?
Yeah, something I was going to ask you too. So we've seen how Siakam has taken the jump. He started playing better this game. He had a monster game this week, and he hasn't had a game where we looked at it and said, all right, he kind of dropped the ball here. So what I want to ask you too is that have Raptors fans jumped the gun too early with saying this is Scotty's team now?
I think it just depends like where the opinion is coming from. If it's from the sense of just like purely looking at Scotty Barnes as a player and what he has to offer, I would say yes. If you're just looking at Scotty versus Pascal, I think you are jumping the gun a bit because of how much Pascal offers. He's just way more polished offensively right now. That's just the truth. He can provide more in terms of a playmaker and as a creator offensively. Scotty is also fantastic in it, and he's still really good as a primary ball handler. But in terms of just pure finishing and scoring the ball, I would still give the edge to Pascal Siakam. But if you're coming at it as in give Scotty the keys and this should be his team based on just the context that Pascal is in a contract year and that you may lose him for nothing this offseason, and if you do keep him, how much money you're going to have to give him, then I think it's a little valid to think about. Like, if you already know what the end of the tunnel is, maybe you should kind of cut loose early and then give it to Scotty now so he can get these reps, so he can start developing. But I personally feel it's a little early to say on that. They're going to have to wait till at least around the trade deadline to make a decision on any of this stuff. So I'm taking a wait and see approach. But in terms of that question of like why are people approaching it this way, it really just comes down to the context of their opinion. Are they just looking at purely a Scotty versus Pascal, which I think is a bit foolish because we're seeing them learn to play together? Or if they're looking at it from like the longevity of roster construction. If you are, then I think it's a little valid to have that point of view, but I still say you take a bit of a wait and see approach.
And as far as my takeaways, it was a crazy week. Like there was a lot of ups and downs. That Pacers game was insane. I was looking at the stats. They have the craziest pace in the NBA right now too, and I was just watching everything. So one of the two takeaways I have from this week is like it still bothers me because I know we don't have a clear answer, but I want to know the direction of the team. I want to know like we can play and we're winning the games, but what does that mean in the long run? What does that mean for the playoffs? Like we're just gonna get the playoffs and get washed. Like we're not playing for a pick. If we don't get anything higher than the sixth pick in the draft, it goes to the Spurs. So I'm so confused. It's like I get happy that we're winning, but it's like, what does this mean in the long run? Like what are we doing to get better in the future? So this kind of takes me to my second takeaway is we got to get rid of Gary Trent. we got to get rid of Gary Trent. I don't know what has to happen, but from what I've seen this past week and even just tonight, shooting 1 for 7 from 3, when he was in that clutch time play, I get you're being cornered right there, but I don't know what pivot move he was trying to do in the post. He stepped out of bounds. He took the shot. It hit off the side of the backboard. It was just everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I feel like now, again, he is one of the Raptors. You could say he's one of the best shooters on the team, but we need space in. We need better shooters. We need more consistent shooters. We need people to help Scotty and Siakam on offense. And I'm just saying, I feel like as the trade deadline approaches, we got to start looking at guys like Gary Trent. I'm not going to jump the gun yet and say people like Siakam or whoever or OG or whatever. I just think we need more of a bench. We need more help here. Tonight, we shot 25% from 3, I'm pretty sure. So there's got to be a fix here. There's got to be a fix and a direction, and then I think both of those two things come hand in hand. Depending on what they do at the trade deadline, we'll get our answer there. But I don't know. What do you think about this week?
Yeah, I think in terms of the direction part of it, you're basically speaking for all Raptors fans. I've been saying it coming into the season. I would love to know a direction. I would love to know which way this team is headed. Is it towards rebuild? Is it towards staying competitive? And unfortunately, the answer is going to remain how it's remained for most of the season. Is we're going to have to wait and see. It's going to come down towards the trade deadline. I feel like when either this team is going to be middling of the pack, and then Masai and Bobby are going to either cut the rope and start over, or they're going to double down and be like, no, we want to continue with Siakam and OG. We think we can re-sign them. We think we can stay competitive. So I know it's frustrating for everyone to hear the same answer again and again, but we're going to have to wait and see. But generally, I am positive coming out of this, no matter how much it feels like we're still around the middle. Coming into the week, a lot of people thought this week was going to be a bit of a barometer for the Raptors. For the most part, they've either played bottom barrel team or they've played like real contenders. And then this week they played a lot of teams that you kind of thought they'd be with competitively in terms of at least where they fall in the East. Orlando ended up being a much better team than most people realized. They're near the top of the East now. Coming into the game against them, you thought the Raptors would match up with them pretty well, and they probably still do, even though they got blown out in that game. But taking on the Bulls, taking on the Pacers and winning, taking on the Cavs where you easily could have won that game, and obviously you blew out Detroit. I think when you look at that week, you can see the Raptors can compete with most of these teams in this Eastern Conference, at least within this chunk. So generally, I am positive, but I don't think it gives me an answer on the direction. That's for sure. And going back to Gary Trent Jr., like, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what's going on with him. If I had to guess, I think the plantar fasciitis is still bugging him in some capacity. Everyone I've talked to that's had plantar fasciitis has said it lingers. It doesn't just go away. It bugs you. And I don't know if that's exactly what's bugging him. If I had to guess, he's dealing with something, because a guy who generally is so much more comfortable shooting, especially from the free throw line, struggling as much as he has, it just seems so uncharacteristic. So there has to be something there. I don't think he's just lost the ability to play basketball. So I think he needs to be able to figure it out. But to that point, Darko, you've worked wonders with Malachi Flynn and his confidence and giving him trust. You need to do the same thing with Gary Trent Jr. and Precious Achiuwa. Both those guys, they are project players right now, even though they should be taking that step in their career. But right now, they need to be reclamated. Darko needs to work his magic. Give them your love. Darko, do the double hand caressing of their face thing that you did with Malachi. Whatever it takes to make them feel better and get back in a groove, because those two players are so important. And Kyle, you're right. If they don't start figuring it out, you may think you can retain a Siakam and an Anunoby, but unless you fix that bench, there's going to be a very limited ceiling on this team. The Scotty plus bench lineups, the Scotty and OG plus bench lineups, the Pascal plus bench, or whatever it is. None of those have been working that well all season. And when they have, the Raptors look good. The only problem is they don't work that well that often. So Precious and Gary are those two guys that you probably would move to upgrade that bench. So either they need to figure it out, or Masai and Bobby really need to start considering what value they have in terms of how they can upgrade this roster around them. Because if those guys aren't giving you much, then really you need to look other places, because that's how important this bench needs to be for this team that doesn't have such a star-studded starting lineup.
You know, it's facts, man. Just like, and as someone like who has plantar fasciitis, bro, I got sent to the ER twice with that. That's how painful it is, you know. So it's crazy. I just remembered too that he's dealing with it. It is crazy painful. Once you have it, one play in basketball will take your feet out. You can't walk for days. It's the most painful thing. I can't even describe it. But when he gets back healthy, I guess we'll give it some more time. You know, December, January. If he keeps it up and he doesn't get his confidence back, it's like you said, we gotta start looking at different avenues. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this week.
Yeah, that pretty much wraps up this week. A pretty average week for Raptors basketball. Some impressive wins, some not so impressive losses. We're kind of used to seeing that from Toronto. Hopefully they can figure some things out, but we know there's probably a couple tough decisions coming their way. But like we said, that wraps up this week. And now we're going to go into our next segment where Kyle brings us through the Raptors roster power rankings. And we're going to see how things have changed since last week. So without further ado, Kyle, take it away.
All right. So now we got to the portion where we do the power rankings. Not too much has moved from last week, but I'll go over it. First, Pascal Siakam. Second, Scotty Barnes. Third, Dennis Schroeder. Fourth, Jakob Poeltl. 5, OG Anunoby. 6, Gary Trent Jr. 7, Malachi Flynn. 8, Precious Achiuwa. 9, Chris Boucher. 10, Jalen McDaniels. 11, Grady Dick. 12, Otto Porter Jr. 13, Garrett Temple. 14, Christian Koloko. And 15, Thad Young. So, I don't know what you think. I think Zulfi got a few adjustments from last week, but nothing too crazy.
Look, maybe I sound like the biggest Malachi Flynn truther out there, but I feel like he should be higher. Like, I think his confidence has seemed to come back. Darko seems to trust him. Obviously, I don't know if he's the permanent fix at backup point guard, but especially after that 14-point outing, 6 of 8 shooting against the Bulls, he's just looking like he's figured something out. So guys like Gary Trent Jr., who seems to be struggling right now, I think like I would personally bump Malachi Flynn up a bit more. But let me know, what do you think about Malachi so far? I'm curious. I don't know if you're fully bought in on it.
See, Malachi has been impressing me, like with his recent play, but for him, like when I looked at his recent games, he's just been like, it's not like inconsistent, but he has been up and down. And I could say the same thing is about Gary Trent Jr. So if you were to like this tonight, he had against Cleveland 3 points, Chicago 2 points, and then he had the 14-point game, but then Orlando 6 points, Detroit 7 points. And then with Gary Trent too, when I looked at his past week, he did have some games in the double digit figures, but tonight too, that kind of left me sour on Gary Trent. So maybe, but I wouldn't get mad at you for putting Malachi over Gary Trent, especially with that nice performance. But I think I couldn't move him, or I couldn't move him any higher into top 6 range just because he had that 14-point game. It's like, all right, if you showed me a little bit more than that, maybe he had 1 or 2 more throughout the week, even 10 points, I would put him over Gary Trent, but not hating on him too much. Just I feel like he has to be a little more consistent than just that one game.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I'm just trying to speak it into existence. I just want, like, I've doubted Malachi as much as just about anyone else has. So I'm hoping he can figure it out and continue to do this. It seems like Darko's just not going to give up on him. So hopefully he keeps him bumping up the list. But hey, 7 is a lot higher than anyone would have had him, to start the season. So good for him. The other name I want to go to, I feel like you're going to have a really good reason for this, but I'm going to bring it up anyways. OG Anunoby behind Jakob and Dennis. Like, after tonight's game, I totally get why Jakob's where he is. But man, OG Anunoby, you just, again, I know this is based on this week's performance, but you kind of just see how good this team can be when OG Anunoby is clicking. We said it throughout the schedule recap. They're 4-0 when he scores 20 or more. It's just OG, the second they figure out how to have him doing that consistently, and that's the biggest question mark there is with OG Anunoby, I think this team is unstoppable. His impact is so important. So I guess I know why you have him at the spot that you do at 5, but justify. Tell me why he's not higher on this list, even though you know how impactful he can be.
You see, like, if I'm going with the whole season so far, right? OG's obviously top 3. This man is making my top 3. But again, since we have to do week by week, like I said here, like he moved up from 7 to 5, obviously, because last week he was injured. He didn't play as much. He had a great game against Chicago, 26 points, and he's been playing better as he eased back from that injury. But however, other games he's just been just okay. He had 11 points against Orlando, 9 points against Detroit. So as long as he can stay healthy and play like the OG we saw this week with 26, I think he'd easily crack top 4, crack top 3. There's no problem there. I think just right now, just because he's coming back from that injury, that's where I have him where he is right now. But no worries, bro. I see what it's like. I see the vision. I know how it is. I want him up there too. I had to kind of evaluate too, because I had him over Jakob when I was writing it, but I was like, I don't know. I saw the game today, and I saw like Jakob himself too. He had 3 games this week with a double-double against the Pistons. He had 3 blocks. He had a monster game tonight against the CAVS. So I couldn't just like do him dirty like that. But I think going next week and the weeks coming, I'll have OG back up in the top 4, top 3.
Yeah, that's fair. Look, again, I don't want to spite Jakob by saying OG has to be over him. Jakob has been doing his thing lately. He's another guy who I don't think has been getting enough credit for figuring out how to play in this system with this team. He's becoming a better distributor. He's spacing as well as he can. The interior passing game between Scotty, Pascal, and Jakob is working really well. So I think Jakob deserves his flowers for having figured out his role in all this. Because obviously, a big part of his game has been what the obstacle and spacing has been for this team. So the fact that he's figuring it out is good. But now I want to get into some sicko mode. I want to go down to the bottom of this power rankings. Otto Porter Jr. Give this man some more respect. At 13, he's around Grady Dick, who's down in the 905 right now. And granted, I think that's a great decision for him and the 905. Yeah. I think it's going to work out. But you have him behind Jalen McDaniels, who can't score a bucket. Look, I know Otto Porter Jr. isn't changing your roster or your team, but the numbers say it. When he plays, they're like a +6 net rating. When he doesn't play, they're like a -2. And I know the sample sizes may vary, but the fact is when they're out there, positive things are generally happening. And it's weird. We don't know why he isn't out there as much. The Orlando game, he was available, but he just wasn't playing for a lot of it until garbage time, and that was a big question mark. And then the next game against the Pacers, you had Otto Porter Jr. play more minutes. I don't know the background. I don't know the situation. Maybe Darko's just saying, hell, Otto Porter's too old. I can't play him that much. But give this man his respect. When he's out there, he's doing better. I got to see him at least at 10, man. Tell me why.
Yeah. I think, okay, I got him at 12. I got him at 12. I just have to make sure, but it's right now, him and Grady are fighting for the battle of the mid right now, okay? Because
come on. Come on, one's in the G League. One got relegated, man. What are you talking about?
That G League game wasn't great either. Like right now, I like you could put one over the other, but for me right now, I just saw a little more province with Grady in the games he did play, because when I looked at Otto's like game logs. Look tonight. Okay, maybe if we get more of a sample size, then I can move him higher. But just tonight, he only played 5 points. He had 0 points. He played 11 minutes against Indiana, had 3 points. You know, he played against and then before that, Orlando 4 minutes, 5 points, which is pretty decent. But you know, it's just, I need a bigger sample size when it comes to Otto. I know he has the ability to affect this team. Like one time I saw him out there, I saw the size, I saw the length, I know what he can do on defense. I don't know why we're just banishing him to the bench right now, not giving him any minutes. I think he has the possibility to move into the top 10, move into the top 8 if we give him some decent minutes and get him out there with, like, say, Scotty leading the bench unit or something like that. Just right now, I see the vision. I see the Otto Porter vision. It just right now, to me, he's not doing anything that's making me say, yeah, man, I'm gonna put this guy in the top 10. Jalen McDaniels, at least he can score a little bit, and maybe I'm just. Maybe
come on! What do you mean? What do you mean? Jalen McDaniels can score a little bit? What are you saying right now?
Jalen McDaniels, to me right now, he's been playing it's close. It's close. He's been playing a little bit better than Otto Porter, but I might have to reevaluate this come next week.
So dude, you better reevaluate it come next week, man. Look, you're right. Otto Porter Jr.'s numbers won't stand out, but he's not a box score guy. He's a plus minus guy.
Yeah.
When he's out there, positive things generally tend to happen. And I think the biggest thing with him is that he's genuinely considered a threat. As crazy as it sounds, the fact that when he's out there in the corners or on the wings, you know, if he puts it up, there's a good chance it can go down. Jalen McDaniels right now can't hit the broadside of a bar, and we see it. He has those moments in transition where he can do something. And you're right, he does have the tools, but he isn't getting it to fall. Grady Dick it's come down to his confidence seems shattered. Hopefully this stints with the 905, even though that first game wasn't great. He's going to grow and get that confidence back. But Otto Porter is just such a surety. He is reliable. You know what you're going to get. You know he's going to be able to have some gravity against defenders, and eventually that's going to lead to positive things, which it has. So that's why I think Otto Porter Jr. deserves a bit more respect. And look, next week I'm calling my number now. I'm calling my shot. Otto Porter will crack the top 10. He's gonna be in the top 10. I'm gonna take a look.
I'm gonna take a look at the plus minus. I'm gonna take a look at the. I'm hoping he gets more minutes. Right now, like I see right here at Indiana, he was plus 14, which is interesting. So it seems like he has a lot of upside too. But then I have that one like vision in my mind of that one game. I forget what it was last week or something, where they're on defense or they're on offense, and Otto Porter's just standing like this in the corner.
Bro, he's old, man. He's old. He's coming off injuries. Let him do his thing.
Not doing anything in the corner here. Like these last players on the list, they're gonna move rapidly. You know, with Grady, he might move lower. Like, because I don't even know how long he's gonna stay in the G League for. You know, like with this performance, like I'm not gonna try to jinx him or nothing. He did shoot like I think he shot like 9% or something like that.
It was like 1 of 9 or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't great. So he might move lower in the list next week if he doesn't play. And you're gonna get Otto Porter up there. Maybe Jalen McDaniels moves down from that 10 spot. You know, maybe I just have him a little too high. But we'll see what happens next week. You know.
Yeah, look, I think you're right though. Overall, this bench is so dire at times that any of these guys, if they can put it together, are going to rapidly jump in the rotation in minutes and on this list as well. Hell, if Christian Coloco can play a couple games this season and get back healthy, and we're all hoping that he can be healthy with dealing with that respiratory issue, the Raptors need another center, at least a consistent center, because Precious hasn't been that. So maybe he would jump up. I know that'd be one of the crazier things to happen this season, but you're right. This team needs that depth at the end from the 10 to 15 spots, and these numbers can change around really quickly if somebody can figure it out. So I think that does it for me. I won't roast you anymore. Hopefully, we'll see what people in the comments
they
think.
may cook me for that though.
Hey, yeah. Look, you're right though that these fringe guys, they're all really close. One good performance can move them back and forth. Yeah. But hey, let us know. Let us know what you think. Do you think I was right in roasting Kyle for the Otto Porter Jr. thing? Do you think I'm dumb for going going to bat for Otto like that. I got a little feisty there for Otto Porter Jr. I said I was going sicko mode, but let us know what you think in the comments. If you love it or hate it, what's happening with that. But now I think it's time for This Week in Raptors History. So let's get to it. All right, now it's time for another This Week in Raptors History. We go back in time through Raptors land and see what we can find. Who in years past popped off, and we have a treat for y'all this week. So let's get into it. We're going to be taking it back to the championship season. A GOAT performance by none other than Kyle Lowry. Against the Atlanta Hawks on November 21st, 2018, Kalo had his 13th career triple-double. It was a vintage Lowry performance. The guard put up 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 17 assists. And those 17 assists came on just 2 turnovers. Talk about efficiency. That's the third most dimes Lowry has had in a game, 19 being his career high. He had 18 twice before this 17. And he did all of that without Kawhi Leonard. All the talk early in the championship season was, can the Raps deal with this Kawhi Leonard load management situation? Are the Raps going to be good when he doesn't play? The Raps were great even without Leonard, 17-5 on the season, and this was one of the examples of why that was. A game where Lowry just did everything to get the dub. This was also before the Gasol trade, so shout out JV, who had 24 and 13. So that was a vintage Lowry performance during the championship season. The vibes were immaculate. Kyle Lowry, I miss you, greatest Raptor of all time. But that does it for This Week in Raptors History. Let us know. Do you remember that performance? Are there any other vintage live performance you remember and you want to think about? But going back, that was Kyle Lowry's 13 triple-double 5 years ago. He's at 21 now. That's 24th all-time in the NBA. He's still putting up triple-doubles. He had a couple last season. He is a surefire Hall of Famer in my mind. Greatest Raptor of all time. Debate a wall if you disagree. But that does it for This Week in Raptors History. Now let's look ahead and preview the next week. Kyle, take it away.
All right, this week for our betting ahead schedule, we're going to take a look at the upcoming schedule. I'll give you guys tips on the money line and our 10-week 10K challenge and give you an update on how that went. So before I take a look at the schedule, last week I told you guys to take the money line on the Magic and the Bulls. How did that go? Well, I went 50%. I went 1 for 2. The Raptors were blown out by the Magic, but they did manage to blow out the Bulls themselves. But we're on for a new week, and new week, new dubs. So this week the Raptors face off against the Nets, the Suns, and the Knicks. Who do you think will take on the money line? But I'm gonna go with the obvious picks of the Knicks, and I won't take the Suns just because they have too much firepower, and the Nets as well. Both New York oriented teams, New Jersey, New York, Brooklyn, whatever you want to call it. We're getting the dubs, okay? And the Suns, I believe, I don't know if the Raptors can do it this one. I believe it'll be a close game just because of the firepower on both teams. But I think, again, the Suns, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, he just hit the game winner today. He's coming off a hot stretch. I just don't see them getting it done. But for the money lines, again, go with the Nets and the Knicks. Next, let's go to our Raptors 10K 10-week challenge. So the update on this week. Last week, I said I think you should bet on the Pacers game. Shouldn't really be too much of a blowout because of the high pace with the Pacers. They'll manage to keep up, and they did. Our stars did get to work. So last week for this challenge, I said Scotty Barnes for 20 points, Siakam for 15. Other legs I'd consider is Scotty for 6 rebounds, Siakam for 6 rebounds, and Scotty for over 1.5 threes. And what are the results? We did, in fact, win the first week of the challenge. But what's even crazier is if you chose all the parlay legs, even the optional legs, they hit as well. Everything hit, just straight money. So, going on to week 2, now we should have $20. We're going to try and flip that into another $20 to give us 40. So, for this week, I'm going to tell you to bet on the Suns game, actually. Not for the money line, but just because of the firepower of the Suns, our stars should be able to show out in that game. But with this week, I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to go with Scotty for 15 plus and Siakam for 20 plus. Scotty just because he hasn't been hitting that 20 parlay mark, 20 points mark. So I'd go with Scotty for 15. Siakam for 20 now that he's starting to figure it out. And other legs to consider, I would say Dennis for over 1.5 threes, Scotty for over 1.5 threes, and the safe Scotty 6 plus rebounds and Siakam 6 plus rebounds. Hopefully we continue to get the W's, but we'll see what happens next.
All right, Kyle, thank you for betting ahead, previewing this next week of Raptors action. Like you said, 3 games, 3 important games to see if the Raptors can finally push past 500. We'll see. Who knows? My prediction is they're probably going to be hovering around that 500 mark. Kyle said he's hoping for a couple dubs, but that does it for us. We want to thank you again for following along with all things Raptors Republic and run it back. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. I'm your host, Zulfi Sheikh, joined by Kyle Ramnerin, and we'll be back next week to run it back once again. Thank you.